I'll actually type that out here, and then while you say that,
Perfect.
and then we'll so that everyone can see it in the chat.
So we're introducing one that you've all seen in your tasting packs. And this is a distillery exclusive that we released for the 200th anniversary for Old Pulteney. So Luke and I were discussing like where we think we should put it. So we're going to put it in between the 12-year-old and 15. So the running order will be Harbour, 12, our Old Pulteney Manzanilla and Oloroso, and then 15, and then finishing on 18. I hope that's all agreeable to everyone. If anyone disagrees, put it in the chat and we will ignore them.
Can you repeat that back to me?
So we're going to start with Harbour, then the 12-year-old, then our, let's see, 10-year-old or 200th, 15, and then finishing on 18.
Marvelous. That's in the chat now, folks. And good to see your kind messages. So brilliant. We're here live in effect. We did it. We made it. I feel like we should have had some dramatic music playing or something.
The countdown soundtrack.
Yeah. So only 5 minutes behind schedule, folks, but thank you so much for joining. It's great to be able to do that in person. We were saying just while we were setting up there, this must be your third or fourth time on?
Third, we've done Balblair.
Yes.
Did we do Anok?
We did Anok
a while ago.
Did we do Anok twice, though?
I think we did, but I don't think I necessarily did the second one, potentially.
Yeah.
I think it's my third.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Marvelous.
That's good.
So you're completing your hat trick.
This is it. This is it.
Brilliant. So for those who weren't on with you previously or on our call with you when you were last on, do you want to maybe tell us, actually first, before we do that, I'm totally all confuddled by this wagering business. Welcome, folks, for those joining us for the first time. Welcome to Digital Drams. So we want, we're coming live from the Princes Square, Glasgow, the newest store to join the Whisky Shop network. The last couple of years, we opened a third store in Moultrie's Walk in Edinburgh. We opened this place here. We opened in Leeds as well, and Exeter. And then a couple of years before that, we opened in Cardiff. Those are all in the last couple of years. So, but this is the newest one. And it's as I'm sure you'll agree, it's lovely. It's really a gorgeous store. So if you're in Glasgow, folks, and you've not been, you might have been familiar with our shop on Buchanan Street, up in Buchanan Galleries. We're only just down Buchanan Street, also on Buchanan Street, but this is Princes Square. You can only see a bit of the backdrop here on that camera, but it's an absolutely gorgeous, luxurious shop. So well worth a visit if you're in the Glasgow area. If this is your first time joining us, we do want to encourage you to sort of get your comments, get your questions in the chat, your tasting notes. We love to hear it. Yes. So please do be as busy as possible. It's why I have this little iPad in front of me so I can see what everyone's saying. And then, I think that's at the end. I'll be giving you out a code for 15% off all of these whiskies tonight. So fill your boots at the end. And yeah, marvelous. So over to yourself. Do you want to tell anyone who might not know you, Stuart, about yourself and your own background?
Yeah, of course. So the last two that we did together online, I was the global ambassador, so representing international beverage. I've now moved into a new role, so less of this, which is sad. But whenever I get an opportunity to do this, fantastic. So I moved into a new role as global education and experience manager, which doesn't actually fit on a business card. So we have to reduce that quite heavily. So effectively managing our ambassadors, who are fantastic. So we've got a team of Flora, who you've met. So Flora is our European ambassador based in Edinburgh. And then we have Paul and Bank, who are based in Bangkok, and they cover the whole of APAC, which is a chewy,
a lot of traveling,
a chewy little region, which is exciting. So for anyone that doesn't know, international beverage, we have a spirits portfolio. So we've got 5 distilleries in Scotland. I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with them. So Old Pulteney, Speyburn, Balblair, Anok or Knockdhu Distillery, and Balmenach, which we don't, I think I might have seen one in here as an independent bottler, but we do not produce a brand from. Karunjin is also ours. That sits within Balmenach, but is actually a separate still. We have Larsen in Cognac. We have 2 distilleries in Thailand, one called Prakan. Some of you may know. It's the first Thai single malt. We have Praya Rum that sits just outside of Bangkok. And then last but not least, Cardrona on the south end of the South Island, which I'm sure a good few people will be familiar with.
Yeah, well, we've done 2 digital drams with Cardrona, and we did one with Praya and Prakan last year. And then we've done Anok and Old Pulteney before.
Yeah.
And Balblair. I think the only one we haven't done is Speyburn.
Yeah. And don't tell Flora I'll do that one. I want back in the driver's seat.
That could be our next one. Marvelous. So we're going to start with the Harbour.
Yeah.
So yeah, do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, 100%. First, cheers.
Cheers.
I'm just going to jump straight in and then talk. I always find myself talking before I actually get a sip of it. So Harbour, I'm sure a few of you might have seen this in the Tesco's of this world. So it's our newest edition, besides looking at the 10-year-old, which we'll come to talk about. And it is, I like to think of it as like the 12-year-old's baby brother, but there's a huge amount to it. So when we first released this, it's a non-age statement, Old Pulteney. And when I first saw the cask make of this and then saw the price point, I was really surprised at how we're managed achieving that price point. So the vast majority of this is all ex-bourbon cask, but the vast majority, over 70% of this is first fill bourbon. So when we get into talk about the 12-year-old, I'll reference it quite heavily here because anyone that's ever heard me talk about the 12-year-old before, when anyone ever asks me to show them Old Pulteney, it's the 12-year-old I show them because I think there's this perfect balance of not just maturation and spirit style, but that thing that is quintessentially Old Pulteney, and that's that maritime coastal character that I think we all know and love with Old Pulteney. Interestingly enough, I think the Harbour shows arguably less of that coastal character and far more of maturation, purely because the cask makeup leans towards first fill bourbon, whereas 12-year-olds makeup is actually a lot more refill. So that dominance of first fill comes into it. So with the Harbour, I find it to be quite chewy sweet. And unless, I don't know if everyone's been drinking heavily all day and have got your palates used to alcohol, this might be the first sip, even at 40%. Alcohol might be the most domineering thing. But sit with this for a bit. Don't necessarily finish it. A few people looking down at an empty glass now. But don't necessarily finish it. Sit with it, nose it, finish the tasting and come back to it. It's super vanilla sweet. And when we go into the 12-year-old after some chat about it, you'll really see that difference, I think, between both of them, despite non-age statement, a younger whiskey and minimum 12 years in effectively the same casks. It's just that makeup of casks that changes.
No, it is. The tasting that you gave before we came live about the mixing your buttery and salty popcorn.
We had a disagreement before we went live around how we eat our popcorn, of all things.
You get in the chat. So I'm not a fan of buttery or sweet popcorn. It has to be salty for me. Stuart mixes his at the cinema, which is fine. That's fine. That's all right. Look,
you used another word earlier.
But was this the whiskey you were referring to? I can't remember. Sorry,
there's a level of the 10 as well, but this I think
because I can definitely get what you mean. That kind of sweet savory.
It gives me that like creme brulee thing as well. There's a salinity at the back, and I think we see that very much through the first 3 drams. And a lot of people say to me in 15 and 18 they still see it, and I don't disagree with them. I think it's my palate. You know, when we talk to Sarah Burgess, who's our head whiskey maker, whose palate is just absolutely incredible. I think I've gone down the path of, I always talk about ratatouille when you can see the colors and just has this organic ability. I've had to drink so much whiskey to learn how to do that, if that makes sense. It's much more zeros and ones, despite me being quite a kind of creative person, but it's much more zeros and ones in my head. So you having to kind of distinguish with these 3, when I get to the 15 and 18, I see less of that salinity, that kind of overriding salinity. And I think that's true, but so many people tell me when we get to 15 and 18, it becomes more kind of salted chocolate, but the chocolate being 90% of that flavor.
Which is a bit more what I prefer to do in this, which was
it's going to get better.
Get a big thing of salted popcorn and then mix in like Maltesers or minstrels, you know, a chocolate.
I think we need an informal vote.
Well, no one's. I'm wondering if we're on mute because no one has any strong opinions on popcorn, which is something I think I care more about than most general elections. But if anyone knows me, that's not true. But so we've got a question here from Christian. It says, for all 5 drams, are they natural color / non-chill filtered? Assuming some of these are, why don't you show it on the label? Would be good to know.
No, it's a really good question. We were actually, me and Flora were talking about this recently. We're trying to develop an internal education document, but that's not important for just now. But all transparency, so the first 3 are color adjusted and chill filtered. The last 2, 15 and 18, are not. So the first 2 come in at 40%. The last one, third one, comes in at 48%. I think we decided to bottle it at. So there's a reason that we don't talk about color adjustment on the label. And this, I'm speaking the royal we as a whiskey industry. I think it's misunderstood quite heavily, and I'll have a lot of people disagree with me in the chat here. So we did a course with IWSR, Scottish Whisky Research Institute, SWRI.
SWR.
And it was fascinating. We spent a full day with them going through different toasts of oak and how we change the compounds when we burn casks. It's not just a case of natural color and flavor coming through. It's also like changing the compositions of the flavor compounds within that wood. It's fascinating. And part of it was understanding E150A caramel color. And I had my perceptions and my, predisposition of what I believed it did. But to the human nose and the rate that Scotch whiskey or the SWA permits it in Scotch, it cannot be detectable by aroma or flavor, which is a remarkable thing to say. So I think it's a misunderstood thing because I had my attitude towards it before going into this, the SWI. And I was like, oh, that's changed my whole anger. Like I've got this misplaced frustration with it. So I think there's that reason. A lot of people do not. Germany, for example, you have to have it on the bottle.
Which is why a lot of bottles will have it, especially Scotch possibly, but in Irish whiskey as well, because it's cheaper just to print it on all your labels somewhere than to have a special
pick and choose per market. So that's the color adjustment piece, and then chill filtration. It's funny, chill filtration was I'm sure there's an American on this call somewhere, so I'm not going to go far down, but it's your fault. It's your fault. Any American on here, it's your fault. But effectively, when we started shipping to America and it was on cargo ships for a long, long time, it would cool down because it's nothing about the dilution, it's about the temperature of the whiskey. I'm sure I'm teaching people to suck eggs here. So when they were getting their whiskey, they were going, why is it cloudy? What's wrong with my whiskey? And it's like, there's nothing wrong with it. That's just the fatty acids and proteins reacting with the cold. So due to them, there was this need to chill filter that went on for years and years and years and years. And now we're at a point where it's much more desirable to have chill filtered and non-chill filtered or non-chill filtered whiskey. And I think that's, as a whiskey lover and a whiskey geek, I just don't touch it. Just leave it natural. And I'm very much of that attitude. But then there's the logical brain comes into kick, and I'm like, well, actually, it doesn't affect you that much. And I think you'd be very hard pressed to have a non-chill filtered and chill filtered version of your favorite whiskey and see the difference between them. I really think it's for us mere mortals, I don't think many of us will be able to do it.
Even
I think
I feel I've never had an exact sort of bottling side by side where this is chill filtered.
It's not interesting to see.
But I've tried a lot of whiskies from different brands where it's like, this is their 10-year-old, and I've tried casks in the warehouse that come from the same composition. And it's like, you do get, I don't know, maybe that is ABV more than the fact that it's been chill filtered, but I do feel like you do get a bit more of that.
So I've done it in the lab, and I find it fascinating because you do it blind. I couldn't. And that's not to say that I'm not the best taster of whiskies. I've just been fortunate enough to be exposed to that side of it. However, I think there's a level of placebo effect that comes into it by seeing non-chill filtered and chill filtered. And inevitably, you're taking out fatty acids and proteins. So the inevitability is that, the texture is being affected. But is it detectable by our palate? I would argue at that level of alcohol, no, not to that same degree.
So this one is chill filtered.
Yes.
Yeah. And at 40%. Yes. But they all are. Or they?
The first two are.
The 12 and 10, Harbour are, and then the other three aren't. Yeah.
We started with a very contentious point, and I feel like it was good though.
I mean, I definitely I will bow to your superior knowledge on the chill filtration for now. But there's part of me still nags it. I do agree with you on the caramel coloring. I don't think it makes a huge difference. I just think it's just a transparency thing for me.
I completely agree.
And I understand especially why the bigger blended brands do it, because for them it's much about consistency. You don't want to, if you're mass producing a whiskey, and there's going to be, because the nature of the production, there's going to be color variance no matter how many casks are going into it.
100%.
So for a consumer who's maybe not as informed as our W Club members, they can they can know every time they buy a bottle of this, it's all going to be the same color. And
that's it. It's the knowledge level of because I've done this all over the world with whiskey clubs, and I love doing tastings whiskey clubs because the knowledge level is so high. And that's the thing, is that we are such a small percentage of people, so having to explain that to the mass market is really, really tricky. It's a really difficult thing to do. As much as we have advocates like myself, you, and on this call, it's a tricky thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we always get on here and on tastings that I've done for the last 10, 15 years, I'm sure you get as well, as people say, oh, you try the cask strength one or you try the higher ABV one, and everyone who loves whiskey goes, oh, this is amazing. How come every brand doesn't just do all whiskey at this? And I empathize with that in the sense that I'm glad I don't, that we, I would wish we would rather do that. I'm a big fan of the higher ABV, cask strength crusader, as I always say. But but like my brother comes around and he does like his whiskey, and he was a cocktail bartender, so he's not exactly ignorant to how these things work.
Of course.
But sometimes after a few drinks, we'll be like, now my shelves don't look as nice as this, but it probably has a similar amount of bottles. I'm not going to lie. And I'll be like, oh, go grab us a whiskey, and he'll go over and he'll be looking there for ages. And he's like, Jesus, Luke, do you have anything that's not cask strength, Because he just doesn't want his head blown off every time.
I'm the same at the house as well, because it's those are the interesting ones, and it gives us the opportunity to drink it the way we want to, right? It's the inevitability of like 64% is that's not going to be the ABV that you're going to love it. The chances are, right? If you are, great, stick with it. But the chances are it might be 61 or 50 or 58, you know? It just gives you the opportunity to drink it the way you want to drink
agree.
it, you know?
But I suppose my point is that most consumers, if we want whiskey to be successful, it needs to be most consumers who don't even drink spirits. 40% is like going to blow their head off.
I make the exact same
people
point.
People don't like wine if it's 15% versus 12% or whatever.
Give me high like
but I'm saying about the general public.
I agree, and I think 40% for us and everyone on the call will be sitting here in the exact same position. Is like we want cash strength, we want high ABV as a minimum. 46, that's what we want to see. But 40% is a lot of alcohol. When you really think about 40% of that bottle is alcohol, that's a lot for someone coming in. And ultimately, that accessibility piece comes from people that more friends to talk about whiskey with.
Yeah.
Therefore, more people in pubs and bars drinking whiskey and talking about it. And then the more successful the W Club is, the Whisky Shop is, it all feeds into the industry about making sure that it's accessible as possible at the beginning to get it up. And then the inevitability is those people go, you know, I really like whiskey. What's next? And then it'll be cash strength stuff. It'll be, you know, maybe peated stuff if that wasn't already their entry level, you know. But no, it's a really good point.
Yeah. I was at a wedding recently and people were drinking, was it tequila rosé? And I was slagging them because I was like,
it's great.
If you want to get, I don't know, I actually don't mind the flavor of tequila rosé.
We've lost them. I think they're all dropping off.
I was like, I don't mind the flavor of tequila rosé. I just resent paying £6 for a shot of it when it's not even 40% ABV or whatever it is, you know, 25 or something. I can't remember. Someone might know in the chat. But I'm like, if you're going to do a shot at a wedding, you got to go for your bang for your buck, get your high ABV shots in, and get yourself.
It's a wedding, celebrate, have some fun, you know.
Yeah. The Shauna says we Canadians agree it's the Americans' fault.
Oh, now we're getting political.
Mike has said, I've had a bottle of this already, vanilla, sweet, and apple fruit. As in before the call, Mike. That's some going. Sweet and salty popcorn. The whiskey isn't too thin, unlike most non-age statement 40% whiskeys. Good legs for an entry level, says Steve. And Steve says 46 to 48 is a good sweet spot. Totally agree with you, Steve.
Yeah,
this,
absolutely.
Unless my eyes are deceiving me, is £37 currently on the Whisky Shop.
I still don't understand how, just basis that's plus 70% first fill bourbon, and you know the cost that you'll usually see is.
And it's you know, I mean, regardless of its cask composition, just the flavour and everything alone, and that has been mentioned in the chat. So I mean, everyone on here is getting 15% off this whiskey at the end of this call. So I think that's a really good one to pick up and have in the house for the summer. Incredible price point. Ali C says Harbour is very easy drinking, sweet vanilla Danish, or pastel de nata. Pastel de nata. I was in Lisbon recently. Can't beat
1 second.
I actually, it's incredible taste of pastel de nata actually. Sweet vanilla lingers, very good entry level juice. Marvelous.
Yeah, and to that point, and I think it's really lovely to hear all those because it's been a new whiskey for us in the market, and we were never nervous about it. We were really happy with what we put out, but it's really lovely to hear that it's been received in that way. And to that point of price point and how good it is, like I'm not going to sit here and be biased or not. It's great whiskey, but we don't have to analyze the hell out of it. You know, you come home after a good or bad day and you want a dram, it's there, it's available, it's easy, and when you finish it, you don't feel nearly as bad about replacing it when it's 80 something plus pounds, you know.
No, totally. Ian says very summery dram, toffee and popcorn, green apples, great starter.
Nice.
Chris Chalk says you're spot on though. The nose is evolving in the glass. The initial hit really ethanol, lead, but some nice vanilla and caramel sweet notes are evolving. Decent entry level. So yeah, some fantastic taste notes. I actually meant to save some for the comparison side by side, but you're look.
I've still got some. I can help you out.
Thankfully, I'm not driving, so. I realize I'm still connected here. I'm just going to come.
Perfect.
So we'll slowly come on to the 12. While maybe people are pouring that and getting it ready. You mentioned Sarah Burgess. She's not been with you long though, is she?
No. Oh God, it's amazing how fast time just disappears. You know, I've known Sarah for a good while now, and she came from us from the Lakes. People hate me saying it's anything good that came out of Macallan was Sarah. It's terrible to say. I love Macallan. I'm just teasing. So Sarah is a good friend, and she is such an incredible whiskey maker. So she joined us, that must be about 9 months now, 8-9 months. And the third whiskey we're about to try is one of hers, like one of her kind of editions of it. And then a lot of people have seen our 30 and 50-year-olds that we've just launched. So she's now doing a kind of global tour launching that. But though that 30 and 50 were her kind of first big babies, expensive babies to come into fruition. So she's just been incredible. And going into certain meetings and her just love of whiskey as opposed to just the bending the knee to specific departments, for example, not that there's necessarily pressure, but having that conversation with her. She loves and respects the need for diversification within a portfolio rather than just homogenization, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know, just going one down one path. The need to produce cool and interesting stuff continuously, which is lovely and refreshing to hear, and have her fight those battles in the rooms that maybe we're not in, right?
Yeah. No, she's fantastic. I mean, I interviewed her for Whiskeria 2 years ago when she was at the Lakes, and yeah, amazing woman, big fan of Sarah. So I was excited. I was sad for the Lakes because when we were chatting to her there.
I love the Lakes.
Yeah, I'm a big fan as well. I've been down to the distillery twice, and you know, especially once before Sarah started and once afterwards, and you know, I find this with all whiskies companies, well, not necessarily to unique to Sarah the Lakes, but people are, you know, everything is about future planning, you know. So when you've got all these kind of things going, and then, you know, someone else is coming in who maybe they might be better or worse, or, you know, but they're taking everything in a new direction. So you're constantly sharing this kind of vision of the future.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's kind of, you're sitting there and you're kind of enthralled by what she's got planned and what she's laying down and all these different samplings in the little lab they'd go in there tasting. So I was delighted for you guys. I'm a big fan.
Oh, I was very excited when I saw her name get called up on the team sheet. You know, it was really cool to see.
No, she's fantastic. Maybe we'll get her on.
I heard one of my favorite things, just as you're touching on it, is Sandy Hislop when I was at Chivas, and we had this conversation, and I remember reading it not long ago, him talking about it again. So for anyone that doesn't know, Sandy Hislop has been the Chivas master blender for a long period of time. So that's everything, their single malts range, Royal Salute, Chivas Regal, Ballantine's. And what a lovely man. But he talked about this, and it's the casks that he's working with. I mean, maybe not now. He's quite had a good long career, so he has worked with casks that he did lay down.
Yeah.
But the casks that he has worked with for the beginning and mid of his career were not his. They were casks laid down by his predecessor.
Yeah.
And the casks that he's laying down are going to be picked up by his successor. And there's something really beautiful about that, and it brings it back to that romance around whiskey, because I think we've talked this before. I'm a terrible brand ambassador. I don't care about the labels. It's the liquid in the bottle and the people that make it. And Sandy illustrated this really beautifully, that there's an inevitability about the romance of whiskey, that he is working with cask that was set down before. He had no choice in what that was. And then the cask that he's putting down, his successor is going to pick up and go, Sandy, what the hell was this? You know? But then they're picking it up and going, oh, this is exciting. So Sarah's working with Stuart Harvey, who's our previous master blender and was for years. She's working with the cask that he laid down and being able to produce things like the third dram that we're going to go into in our 30 and our 50.
Yeah. One of the most romantic, I'm sure there's loads of other examples, and sorry to talk about another brand, but
go for it. No,
the Middleton Distillery, the master distiller there for decades, in the middle of the 20th century, was Max Crockett. And at the time, it was the old distillery there. It was knocked in the late 70s, early 80s, and the modern distillery that Pernod own is now there. But when it was the old distillery, it used to have distiller's cottages on site, and he lived on site. And his son Barry was born on there, and then it was his son who took over from him in the 1984 or something like that.
Very cool.
So he retired in maybe 2018 or something. So for like nearly 100 years, maybe not quite, maybe 80 years, you had a father and then a son working. You know, so the son's producing casks that were overseen by their father, which I think
what
is
a great Christmas day that would have been. Like that. I just opened a series of bourbon. What the hell were you thinking?
But also working in the distillery that you were born in.
Exactly.
Well, you know,
there's a romance, and we see stories like that quite a lot across the industry, whether that's in Ireland, Scotland, the States. It's quite lovely to see still.
Yeah. No, it is. So tell us about this 12-year-old.
So as I said at the beginning, when people ask me to show them Old Pulteney or we're at whiskey shows, you get a lot of people just going, oh, I'll take the 18 or I'll take the 25. And you're like, okay, have you had Old Pulteney before? And sometimes it's a no. And it's like, look, do you have like 5 minutes? Can I give you 2 drams at least? And the first one I'll always start them off with is Old Pulteney 12. So for anyone that doesn't know, Old Pulteney is on the northeast coast of Scotland in a place called Wick. So it's just about 20 minutes south of John O'Groats, really close to the northern border. And we have this really interesting thing that I think everyone thinks about when they think about Old Pulteney. It's very synonymous with it, and that's coastal character. And this really interesting thing, so all of the casks at the distillery will go into single malt, all of them. They're not going to blended scotches or third parties. They're going into our single malt scotch. So when you get there, I think distilleries have two things realistically. Any spirit, arguably, mezcal comes into play with raw material, but two things: spirit style and cask that you're putting in realistically. But with Pulteney, I think truly believe that a third thing comes in, and terroir with whiskey we don't necessarily talk about. But I'm not talking about terroir of where the barley was grown, etc. It's location is affecting our flavor profile. And with the harbour, as I'm sure if someone go back to it now and knows and taste it now, it's getting even sweeter. I think that vanilla is even getting higher as we go.
Big fan, yeah.
But the 12-year-old has this balance of majority refill bourbon. There's some first filled in there to balance it out, but majority refill bourbon, minimum 12 years matured. You've got that spirit style of Old Pulteney, which a lot of people don't think about, is actually quite fruity. It's actually quite estery. Them marrying together, and then unmistakably is the coastal maritime character. There's this salinity, saltiness, if you will, right, that comes into play. And I've always talked about it as like, it's not sodium chloride table salt. I think it's so much more romantic than that. It's almost like nosing the coast, but it's not purely that. There's the vanilla and the orange citrus that we see from the casks and the spirit style coming into play. And this has been my dad's shelf since I was a little boy. So it's always been Glengoyne, Old Pulteney, and Talisker. Those are the three whiskies that my dad constantly had in rotation on the shelf. And until I was about 18, I thought whiskey tastes disgusting. But then going back and then obviously working at Old Pulteney, which he's incredibly happy about, bringing him all these different samples, is that really the Old Pulteney 12 for me is just the perfect example of what Old Pulteney produces as the distillery style. Going into 1518, incredibly delicious. Our 1350, absolutely stunning. But if I was to ever show somebody Old Pulteney, 12-year-old would be the first bottle that I'd bring out.
Yeah, I can see why. I mean, it's amazing how that salinity kind of lingers at the back. And I can't remember, was it on one of these tastings? Someone not listening might remember, or was it on a different one? But because there's a few whiskies that promote this idea that it's coastal and brings in the salinity, but going back to your kind of idea about chill filtration and caramel coloring, is this idea that actually, the way we distill whiskey and the way the chemical whiskey of alcohol is that, it's impossible to get an actual organic salinity in a whiskey. Like, it can't survive in that environment, or it doesn't.
The salt crystals cannot permeate the cask. They cannot get in.
So yet it's unmistakably there in this,
and it's beyond the placebo effect.
Like
there's so many of us that are like, and the Dave Brooms of this world, the Billy Abbotts of this world, Don Davies, we're all like, there's salinity in there. But you're completely right. There's no possible way that to happen, but it's unmistakably there. And I think Old Pulteney is, and this is going to be a biased statement, but I think it's the best example of coastal profile that you can find in whiskey. I think Glasgow does an incredible job of it as well. But it has its own merits, but I think Old Pulteney 12 really demonstrates coastal character beautifully.
And do you find it's there in the new make, or?
No, the new make. If you've ever been to the distillery and you're walking past the spirit safe, can't be operating heavy machinery in there. But if you're walking past the spirit safe when it's running spirit from the spirit still, you'll smell it. You'll smell new make spirit 1,000 times. That very unique ester, fruity, almost sharp green apple. Very close to that. Very, very close to that. We've got wide glass windows in Prince's.
We've got an audience
shut yet, so people are walking past going, "Are those guys just having a bevy in the whiskey shop?"
That is exactly why we both turned around in unison there.
At least it's live. If someone does break in,
exactly. And the door is locked, so I hope. Marvelous. No, so we'll see what we're saying. So, someone had made, while we were chatting, I saw it come up the corner of my eye. Frank D has made a sort of backhanded compliment towards the harbour. To be fair, if there's E150 in the harbour, there doesn't seem too much given the colour. So he was kind of slagging the colour a bit, but I like that.
No, I think that's a fair statement.
So yeah, Micah said 12 is a wonderful toffee and vanilla coastal. It was the first Pulteney. Sean says, works nicely with a nibble of dark chocolate too. Ali says, Old Putney is a staple in my collection. Oh, Old Putney 12, this is. Always have a bottle in, stewed apples, vanilla ice cream with apple strudel, a hint of sea salt in the background. Absolutely excellent stuff. Melvin says, 12-year-old Old Putney is my favorite, £30 a bottle out there, better than some £40 bottles, even better when it's on offer. Amazon account says it's been bought 30 times. That's pretty impressive.
Those stats always go a bit, oh no, I don't want to see that.
Ian says, get the green apples again, but a great sea salt finish. Very impressed. Scott says, oh, I like the 12. Reminds me a bit of Glen Scotia. I can see that.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's a good shout. Sorry for another personality challenging question, potentially challenging question. Sorry.
I love them. They're great.
Totally unable to read today. It is just great to have someone from the distillery to provide some info. Have the recent changes for Annock and Speyburn worked out for you commercially? I know there's a lot of whiskey geeks disappointed, and I agree with that, but I accept the Annock and Speyburn ranges may be more suited for beginners and non-geek whiskey shoppers now. Did that strategy work? And if so, will you adjust Balblair and Old Putney in a similar way? Brackets, lower ABV, question mark.
Who sent this question in and where do they live? No, I'm kidding. No, it's a really fair question, one that we've had very regularly. Because as a whiskey lover, it was a shock to see it come through, and I was part of the discussions around it. I'll answer. I'm always very transparent when I answer these questions like this. So with Speyburn and Annock for that matter, a lot of people who know and love or know and love international beverage and have seen our brands grow for a long time. We've always been quite a grocer, like off trade. For anyone that doesn't know, that's like Tesco's, Asda's, wholesale, online. That's always been our focus. We've never really focused on the on-trade and the experience, that touch point of engaging with the brand on an emotional level. It's always been, anyway, the point I'm making here is that I think it was the right thing from the long term. And what I mean to say is that we have right now one brand manager for Annock. That's it, one person, right? When you look at other brands that have got teams of 15 and 18 people, to be able to do NPD and all these things, new product development, sorry, I'm using acronyms that don't make any sense. We use them far too often. To be able to do that on a regular basis is a difficult thing. It's a really, really challenging thing. But there's not been as much love as they deserved for a long time from a brand perspective, not from a whiskey perspective, but from a brand perspective. And over the past 2 years, that focus has been there. And we've had people like Claire Arnott, who's with us for Annock, Jack Cooperson, who's doing incredible jobs, and Anna Gregory, Sarah McDonald, these incredible people that I work with in the day-to-day who love what they do and love these whiskies and love this brand and distillery. What they've been able to do is effectively reset it and start from not scratch and produce these incredible brands and labels and liquids. And have the conversations I'm having with them now is, okay, so what's next? What's the next thing that we release in a year's time, 2 years, 3 years time? What's the long-term plan, and what other cool things can we discuss? So with Speyburn, it was a reserve choice and kind of a reset almost and refresh, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen from the old bottles to the new, but with that came a new attitude. And there was this thing of, I remember going to the States and someone said, it's just a cheap single malt. And I came back and I spoke to Jack, and it annoyed me because I was like, it's going to the distillery you've been and seeing how we make it and the casks that we have, knowing how good that is and the price point. I hated the way he said it. And Jack had to kind of calm me down. He went, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a cheap single malt. And I was like, it was the way he said it. It wasn't the sentiment. Because what we've been able to produce, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen, is I think our Speyburn 18 is like sub 100 still, which is amazing to see. But the conversation I'm having with Jack is like, so what other cool stuff can we do? And specifically the Annock, again, being that, if anyone's met Gordon Bruce, one of my favorite human beings on planet Earth, our distillery manager, the most sarcastic man on planet Earth with a wit to back it up. What cool stuff can we do? So Sarah's come in, we've already sat in meetings going, hey, what cask can we throw this into? Like, what cool stuff? Like, it should be sitting at a higher ABV. So there's things on the horizon that are not confirmed, but the conversations are happening. And once we actually have a platform for these brand managers to actually get their head above water, to breathe and push forward, that's what's going to come. So it's an exciting, the conversations that we're having are incredibly exciting, but I know that we've probably pissed a lot of people off in the short term. But I just want everyone to know, and every time I carry this story forward, is that it was done for the right reasons, for the long term and longevity of these, not just brands, I hate using that word, these whiskies, to ensure that we have the right position as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the comment, and but I also appreciate where you're coming from. I've personally always looked for like value for money, like bang for your buck. And for a while, I used to always say it was Glen Scotia double cask.
Was great.
It was at a cheaper price, but I mean, it's still a great whiskey. But I think it was slightly about a bit cheaper. I think the first time I picked it up for about £32. I could not get it. This is about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe not 10 years ago. It was, I think, my first ever trip to Scotland before I ever knew I'd end up living here. 2017, I want to say. So it was definitely less than £35 anyway. It was in Caithness, Whisky Shop in Caithness, and I just couldn't believe the value for money in that. And I was like, and then it was like picked up a Glenfarclas 25-year-old for a lot more than £35. But again, this was just before COVID, and it was maybe like it was like 100 and something pounds, and it was for a 25-year-old. Even then, it was like, wow, this is just so. I've always
seeing the trend, you know.
And so this was like an outlier in terms of age statement price, but also it had the quality. Like it was really good. It's good whiskey. And Speyburn 18 was my recent one from. I finished it all now, but I haven't drank it in about a year. But like from visited a distillery a couple of years ago, I picked up 2 or 3 bottles of them.
Well done.
And I picked up 2. My brother picked up 1, and so we had 1, and he left it at my parents' house. So every time I went home with my parents, there was a bottle there, and I had 2 at home. And I just every time I crack it open, I was like, I can't believe what good value this dram was. Not the best 18-year-old in the world, not the worst, but for a quality versus pound value,
pound for pound, I
thought it was amazing. An incredible whiskey. So for me, that's always what I look for, is to not to distract from Christian's question or your answer, but if I feel I'm getting quality and value for money from a brand, then I'm happy out there.
And the kind of the bottom line, I think it's important to have the explanation to that question that I've done, but I think the bottom line, and please, if there's any further follow-up questions to it, please throw them in. But the bottom line to it is kind of watch the space. That wasn't the right and done. It's really, these guys are really thinking about how we can develop, and I'm getting brought into those conversations. Sarah, of course, is leading those conversations in more cases of what do we have in the back, like what cask do we have, you know, what might the SWA allow us to use legally and not call spirit drinks soon. So it's in safe hands is what I probably want to leave this with. And you've gone through a lot of changes of brands in general. I mean, you mentioned like you purchased Cadrona and Larson Cognac.
I mean, you're going through a lot of change at the moment, and growing and expanding and changing. So it'd be interesting to see. It's difficult. It provides both amazing opportunities, but also challenges for a company of your size to kind of operate like that.
It is, because it's you know, we're all seeing it, you know, your favorite whiskies or the aspirational whiskies that are just dynamic as hell, and you see it from the whiskey shop's perspective. So for us to do that with a team size that we have, I think it's amazing watching them work. It's the emails I get at 8 p.m. on a Monday, and you're like, okay, go to the pub. You're done. But they really care is the word I use. It's not that, I think no one, when you're in this industry, regardless whether you're front consumer facing or you're behind it, there's an infectiousness to it. And it's the reason I think so many people want to stay in this industry, is because it's not just a simplistic product that we sell. There's an emotional attachment, because these brand teams eventually they go and see the teams that have been there for 20, 30 years at the distillery, and that's infectious. I'm very much the id, if you will, of that, but being able to bring them and show them and kind of infect them with that love, and then they go back to their, you know, the PowerPoint presentations that they do, they look at it from a completely different angle if they hadn't worked in the industry before. No, it makes perfect sense. We'll jump on to a few more questions. Chris and Kat says, absolutely get the ice cream and apple strudel. The way saltiness lingers after is great. Apples with coastal funk. Nice.
Did a tour of Speyburn and some history of the old distillery. Says Honourable Secretary St Andrews Thistle Golf Club. Gordon, that's actually the name.
Fantastic.
Gordon gave us Whistle Stop Annock tour. Great experience.
What a man.
What I love with the 12, it is such a lengthy, oily maritime finish for such a price. Speyburn, phonemic dram, pneumatic
drum maltings. It's the drum maltings that we have. They were discontinued in 1967.
I feel like the most dyslexic man in the world today for some reason. That's not a thing. I actually am dyslexic, so it's not I'm not shaming people. But so it's worse than it normally is. Normally this kicks in after about
5 beers we had before.
But as people have testified, towards the end of the call, my reading comprehension does dip slightly. I would land in Wick back in the early 80s with the Danish Gill netting fleet. Gutted I wasn't into whiskey back then. I bet the fish were too, Melvin. The Annock 18 is a gem to be treasured. Annock is still the best whiskey that nobody's heard of. Annock 12 is my favorite. 40% single malts, says Darren.
I don't disagree with that statement at all. The one thing I was going to say to everybody is if you've still got some Harbour in your glass and you haven't already, is go back and nose it and see how different it is. The most I've ever seen a whiskey kind of, let's call it oxidation, is Balboa 12, is going back to it and seeing it go from pineapple tartness to liquid creme brulee. It's remarkable. But you'll see this with Old Pulteney 12 and Harbour, is going back to it. You'll see that you maybe thought of it as not as intensely bourbon matured as you might have thought, but going back to it, you'll see that difference specifically between the 12 and Harbour. I think it's good to see. And you're good there. I have a lot of home. This your Harbour?
No, this was my Harbour actually. The one I went back to that. Thank you. Very generous.
No, not at all.
You trying to get me, John, drunk?
I'm going to try to steal some bottles when we're done here.
We'll just forget to lock the door. They'll be like,
there's shades here, right? We can just sit in here and crack open something.
Where I'm from, shades is actually the nickname we give the police.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, that question works two ways. Are there shades here?
Yeah, no, that's why I mentioned. Yeah. Are there shades here? So I'll actually check the price of that, and we've got a couple more questions, and then we will move on. Someone has also asked a question about the 10-year-old, which we're going to break the bad news in a second. So Old Pulteney.
There you are.
Spelled it wrong, but it's fine. It still came up.
So
£48 for this one, and you'll get 15% off at the end of this tasting. So yeah, another amazing value dram, I think, for its money. Krista says, Luke, I've been looking on the website and the 10-year-old is not available. So we're going to come on to the 10-year-old next.
Yes. Yeah, we are.
So we'll slowly come on to that, and we'll answer that question. I've also got that's it. Well, Melvin said, wow, wait till you get into the 10-year-old. This is totally different, OP.
This is different.
So the 10-year-old is a distillery exclusive.
Sadly, for a lot of people, considering how far away Wick is for most, yes, it is a distillery exclusive.
Could maybe sell them on Vinted or Depop.
I'm sure I can go and buy a case and sell them at an extra 20% for everyone.
So we wanted this featured on the tasting so that you could try it, but try something new, because we did, now it's been about 3 years, but we have done Old Pulteney before on this. So some of these drams have been featured on Digital Drams before, and when we often do visit brands, especially brands we like you guys. But when we do, we try and do add point of difference and stuff into the tasting lineup, so that people aren't just trying the same core range drams again. So that's why we've included the 10-year-old, and because it's 200 years of Old Pulteney, which we haven't really touched on.
No, not at all.
So we can talk about that while we're drinking this dram. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not available through the Whisky Shop or anywhere else. It's only at the distillery.
Just at the distillery.
And not even on your D2C website or anything like that.
It might actually be. I know there's discussions around it, so it's worth checking oldpulteney.com and go have a look and check if it is, because I know there were discussions just last week whether it's available or not. So you might find it on the website.
Buy the rest of the drams off us.
Buy everything else. Go and buy a few 18s from the Whisky Shop.
Shipping, and you get your get your points, your W Club points, and your 15% off.
I've got no discount stuff for you.
Exactly.
That's it.
So Christian says it is available on the OP website.
Fantastic. Good. Run. Don't walk. It's limited.
Yeah, but we won't have a 15% offer. But yeah, so all the other ones we will.
So this one is
those in the Harbour. So it's the right one.
Our Old Pulteney, this is we're celebrating 200 years this year, which has been not many distilleries, as much as we see a lot of noise about it, there's not many distilleries that reach that. So in 1826, founded up in Wick by a guy called John Henderson. Now Pulteney, we get our name from the man who founded the harbour, but the harbour itself was built and established before John Henderson bought over the warehousing space, and built Pulteney Distillery inside of it. So 200 years, and we came to, there's always been this discussion, if anyone knows Michael Jackson, and no, not that Michael Jackson, I want to be really clear. The whiskey writer, Michael Jackson, he referred to Old Pulteney.
Who also has a biopic coming out soon. So.
Does he? No. Oh, okay. That's those 5 years. But Michael Jackson referred to Old Pulteney as the Manzanilla of the North, which I thought was a really lovely thing because of that salinity. And Manzanilla, for anyone who doesn't know, is a type of sherry that is specific, that has that real flavor profile of saltiness. It has that salinity to it as well. So what we did was, or what Sarah Burgess did coming in, is that this is 10 years old, so matured for 10 years in oak. We had refill bourbon casks, and then we've re-racked into Oloroso, into Manzanilla, and then married at the very end. So this comes in at 48%. Super interesting. But I think with the three of these, there's a DNA that lines between them, specifically all being ex-bourbon kind of born. But this just has a little bit of an edge to it. Now, the last time I tasted this was before we put a label on it. So this was in the lab the last time I tasted this. So there's a bottle for me at the office that all of our employees got, which is very lovely, as a celebration for 200 years. And I haven't picked mine up yet. So this is the first time I've had this in 3 months, 4 months, maybe. So Slange, cheers. And happy birthday, Old Pulteney.
Yeah, happy birthday, Old Pulteney.
Cheers.
It's amazing how it changes that salinity on the end. Yeah, I mean, finding it hard to find my words here. It is incredible. I'm a big fan of Manzanilla as a sherry, like in general. Like drier sherries, nuttier sherries are always, that's my my second love in life after whiskey. But so you get the salinity of the kind of first two we've tried, and then it has that long dry finish under it. And it's almost like a bit of white pepper there as well. It's extraordinary actually as a dram.
It's really, really cool. The nuttiness 100% when you said it, that was the first thing that kind of sprung to mind as soon as you mentioned it. But I think if you put that into an opaque glass, you know, a black glass or a blue glass that they tend to use, I reckon that you would pull out. I reckon that you would think that is, now remember the E150A is minimal to get it to just a consistent level. I'm actually wondering if we actually color adjust this. I'll need to double check that and let you know. But you would expect this to be darker, I reckon. I reckon if you taste this in a dark opaque glass, I think you'd expect it to be darker. In the back of it, I'm seeing like chocolate raisins. And I don't know if that's the texture on it that's driving that, or it's the profile I'm getting of kind of bitter chocolate. But it's still sticking. And you know that way when you're trying to collect at the back, there's still this like creaminess that comes through in it.
I can get the dark chocolate. Not really raisins for me personally. But there's definitely, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what the chat is saying. No one's got tasting notes in yet. Melvin has said it's a nightmare to get to Wick by train from Grimsby. I can imagine. So if anyone lives close by OP and can get me a bottle of this 10-year-old, please. Is Speyburn Distillery 250 years old this year?
No, so we've celebrated 125 years just 4 years ago. So 129 years, I think. Yeah, just about. Yeah,
if it was 4 years ago.
Yeah. No, thanks. So no, not quite 250. It's just a baby of a distillery.
And Graham says very dry finish. I get banoffee pie. Interesting. Yeah,
nice. I don't hate that at all.
Sea salt chocolate, definitely get that. Very fruity on the nose, bit of spice, great finish. Might be worth a pickup. Christian says very nice. I like Manzanilla. Could you explain the price point? Seems a bit on the expensive side for a 10-year-old. Even for Manzanilla, special casks, question mark. I don't know the price point, so that's over to you.
I'm trying to remember the price point. The funny thing is I work from the storytelling perspective, then it goes to the sales guys and they go, yeah, this how much, you know, like basis our cost of goods, etc. So from a 48% whiskey as well that we're offering out at, this is a limited run.
£99 says the lads.
£99. This is a limited run, and then Manzanilla Oloroso. Well, Oloroso is a fairly commonplace sherry cask now, but Manzanilla is quite a pricey cask to buy. So I'm not sure what we're sitting at just now, but for our Oloroso cask, to give you a frame of reference, we're over £1,000 to purchase in now. I think we're about 1,250. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
Manzanilla, significantly more. I'm not sure. I couldn't give you. I wouldn't want to give you one because I'd be lying, because I don't know. But it's significantly more.
In terms of sourcing casks like that, so most sherry casks, as I'm sure isn't a surprise to people listening, are seasoned, especially for the purposes of aging whiskey. They're not really, because sherries tend to use a Solero system. Not always, but almost all the bodegas do, where they blend vintages across a range of casks, and they basically try and keep the casks forever as much as they can. So there's casks in these bodegas in Jerez that have been there for hundreds of years. Some of them, you know, I think most of the average is maybe 40 or 50, but they live there a long time.
Yeah.
So, and sherry isn't as popular as whiskey. So
unfortunately, because you and I both love sherry.
No, exactly. Like, my old boss got me into sherry. He used to import it into Ireland, and he it's the same thing with another fellow who years ago when I was about 19 got me into kind of appreciating whiskey first. Is this someone's enthusiasm for something that wears off? You know? And sherry to me was Harvey's, you know, cream or whatever. And
that's all we knew.
Yeah, exactly. So then he was like, "Oh, I'll try this." Now I don't drink as much as I should. I always have a couple of bottles at home, but fortunately, any place that has a really good menu of sherries tends to be somewhere that I can afford to go drinking. So
usually, I'm the same.
5-star hotels and the like. So you know, so when you're mass producing sort of Oloroso casks for the whiskey industry, because that's a you know, a kind of established supply chain, you can get them obviously cheaper because there's bodegas that specialize in making sherry just to flavor these casks, and that either goes into vinegar or sometimes gets destroyed. A small amount of it gets bottled, but most of it doesn't actually end up in the sherries that we know. And then they go over and age our whiskies. But obviously Manzanilla isn't produced like that, at least on that mass scale. Maybe it is. I don't know. That's my question, I suppose. How do you get Manzanilla casks? Are they ex-Solero casks or?
Well, that's part of it, is that it's not produced on mass scale, so therefore small supply, a small demand, cost goes up. So, or high demand in this case. So if we get all of our casks, first sherry casks from Jose Miguel Martin in Jerez, and I spent some time with. So Jose passed away 6-7 years ago, two brothers, and I spent some time with Miguel. And I used to speak to sherry so confidently, you know, and how wrong I was. The things that he knows about sherry, like the things that he's forgotten, I'll like never get to know, kind of thing. And what was remarkable is going around with him and pointing out his Pedro Jimenez, Fino, Oloroso, and going through the process, is that the way that I think there was this outcry, maybe pre-COVID, we'll all know and remember it, about spraying on sherry using the cask, and then that was it. Like there was
this practice that existed for a long time.
Yeah,
I think there was a blog going around, maybe 2018 or 2019,
something like that.
That was so. I mean, nothing in it was wrong, but it was just detailing it. And I remember some of the whiskey forums I was on. People were like, "How can they do this?" And
and I was like, and at that time I was still learning in a big way. I just kind of entered the whiskey industry, so I was like, "Oh, come on, what the hell's that thing?" But going around with Miguel, what was fascinating is I was asking about how the process works, like how when we're sourcing for our distilleries and, you know, Macallan or wherever, because a few people have tried to buy him out, and he's like, "No, I like working in different places." And I was like, "How does that work? Like, do you have to have them kind of customized?" And he was like, "Every single time." He went, "So any time that we were buying from, for example, Speyburn as a spirit style is different to Bubbler, which is different to Pulteney, which is different to Glenmorangie. Is a really great example. Incredible liquid, the tall giraffe stills, right? They're old gin stills. It's a quite fine spirit because it produces that beautiful fruity character, and you can't have that fruity character without having a lovely fine spirit. So introducing that into the same sherry casks in Pulteney, you're going to completely different reactions, and it's not just a case of casks are different side by side. It's literally two different polar spaces. So what he was doing was, for example, to keep it kind of layman, is that for one sherry cask in Oloroso, he was leaving in for Oloroso in for 6 months, because that was optimum. There's a real optimum point for Speyburn. And then for Pulteney, he was maybe leaving it in for 10 months, because that was the optimum depth and infection of that sherry butt for Pulteney spirit to go into, which I thought was a depth that was not actually considered by the industry as a whole. I just thought that we got a good quality Oloroso, seasoned it for as long as we possibly could, and launched spirit into it. And in fact, that wasn't the case. We were getting tailor-made suits.
Yeah, today I learned. I didn't even know that.
And I thought that was such a... when you learn these things in whiskey, you're like, oh, of course. Like, that's logical. But in fact, you don't think about it until you think about it. And it was such an amazing revelation to be like, oh, of course, that makes perfect sense. Like, why would you just have, if you've got a really fine spirit versus a maybe oily spirit, why would you age the sherry in the cask before? Because that's going to seep into different depths of the wood. Because the one thing that he said to me as well was, it doesn't matter how good your sherry is. You have the best sherry in the world. If your wood's rubbish, the whole thing's off. So you need to see the wood. It can't just seep in for 12 years, the sherry, and your whiskey will be terrible. There is that bell curve of optimum for each distillery, which was such a learning for me.
And sherry is like the rest of the wine industry, where they're trying to neutralize the flavor. You know, when you age a whiskey, you're trying to get the flavor from the wood. When you're aging a red wine or a fortified wine, you're doing the opposite. The reason they like the older and reuse the cask again and again and again is because they want the wood as a vessel. They're not trying to get all these oaky vanilla flavors out. That's kind of a byproduct rather than the point. Yeah, my old employer in Ireland, Celtic Whisky, they do. If anyone gets a chance to try them, they are very, very limited. But they're incredible. It's called the Celtic Cask range, and they do a few kind of rum barrels and everything, but they're inspired by a bodega, well, actually independent bottler in Jerez, and then they're called Fino something. I think maybe it's just Fino. I could be wrong. And then there's like Fino and then the number. And all they do, every release is a unique release, not necessarily with logic. The last one, 45, 35, one could be a Manzanilla, one could be a Palo Alto. So this is what they do with Celtic casks, where it's Celtic cask 1, 2, 3. And the sherries in them are all, some of them are rum casks and other things, but all the sherry casks are ex-Solero casks. So they're all like Palo Cortado or Amontillado, these amazing stuff. But that most people, even whiskey drinkers, lovers I know, have tried them and they just never tried anything like it because we don't really use ex-Solero casks in this. I mean, they do, but it's very rare. But also some of these casks were like laid down in the 50s, where how we make casks now has changed, and casks used to be dried out with sulfur and all this kind of stuff.
Sulfur candles.
Sulfur candles, yeah, exactly. So that's why when you try really old whiskies, it's the same thing in old whiskies. You get this kind of sulfuric, and it's often to do with sometimes to do with the old stills, but it's often to do with the sulfur candles being used in drying out the cask. So you get these like incredible sherry notes that you would just never get in a regular whiskey, plus these sulfur casks. But it often made me think, and I could be wrong on this, but like it's easy for him to do that because he bottles this once, never has to worry about it again. It produces 200 bottles or whatever he gets out the cask. I can't remember, and then that's gone, and he doesn't have to worry about replicating it. Whereas if you're Speyburn or Old Pulteney or Macallan, you have to keep going back to the well again and again and again, and you need consistency and everything. So of course these sherries are done as you've described them, as we've been discussing, on that scale, because the whiskey industry just wouldn't exist. There'd be no point in even talking about sherry casks if it wasn't for that.
And the cost reflects that. They are expensive, really, really expensive to buy, but ultimately it produces good quality whiskey. And
we never used actual sherry casks in the end, even going back to when Pulteney would have been founded 200 years. So we're bringing this segment back around. So 200 years ago, when Old Pulteney was founded, the reason we use sherry casks.
I was wondering how we were going to segue that.
Most people know. If people are still alive. We've lost some people actually. People have dropped off. Boring sherry chat. But the casks that were sherry casks that we use in whiskey were casks that we used to transport the sherry, not age the sherry.
Exactly.
So that's where it all stems from originally. So seasoning a cask is the same thing. If it's seasoned for 6 months, and if it would have sat in the cask for 6 months to get to Bristol before then being sold on to a
it's got better.
Exactly.
It's got better.
So yeah, it's all the same really. So yeah, we've got a few comments. Brilliant explanation of oak effect. He said that half an hour ago before logging off. Thanks, Mike. Not joking. Bob says, or Frank D says, done the same. 12 rounds, rounds off the harbour nicely. Bob says, just mix up the remainder of the harbour 12 and the 12-year-old together. Interesting shout, Bob. Great single malt blend, merging the best of both individual drams. Liking the 10-year-old, but it's just a bit pricey. Ali C says very dark chocolate raisins lingering on the finish. That's like your tasting note. Evan says very, very, very dry, very dark chocolate without the bitterness. Beautiful dram. On the nose, it reminds me of spotted dick pudding.
Nice.
Interesting.
Good tasting notes. Really solid tasting notes.
Licorice on the finish, says Frank D. I think that was where we were on that. So yeah, this is an extraordinary dram. Thank you for adding it.
Not at all. It was, I think just having that point of interest was really good. But it's been a really exciting time celebrating 200 years. We've had cakes in the office and parties up north. We had a bunch of people up in Wick where we threw this huge celebration and sampled some really exciting whiskies and touring the distilleries. We've currently got a party going on in London, hence why you and I are here. We weren't invited. We've got a big party in London. We're going through things in Tokyo, etc. So it's just a really exciting time to celebrate the team. And Malcolm Waring, who's our master distiller, he's been traveling to every single one. So it's just been celebrating everything they've done. So the 30-year-old that we've released, he put that down. Put that cask down. So he was, I think, 6-7 years into Pulteney at the time as a stillman, and he put that Ranger cask down. So he's been watching him talk about the 30-year-old has been really lovely. Him kind of bringing these anecdotes and stories off the cuff, and having seen him done it a few times now, nothing's been scripted, and you see him pull a new story out, and it's really lovely to see him kind of own what he's done over the past 38 years.
No, that's brilliant. We'll come on to the 15, just because I'm a bit conscious of time.
Yeah.
But that was an incredible dram. I hope everyone agrees. So yeah, folks, while we're getting that poured, do have any questions about the brand or about any of these whiskies, do get them in the chat. Don't be shy. And also this different format of having us here in person. Do let us know, not necessarily, you don't have to do it straight away, but at least at the end of the call or maybe even by email afterwards, let us know what you think, if this is a format we should repeat on the Digital Drams. So tell us about the 15. This, I believe, could be wrong, but 3 years ago was won the 18 or under category in the W Club Awards.
It did. It did. Were we not doing a tasting at the time? Or no, we did a tasting post that for the awards.
Afterwards. Yeah. I feel like that might be wrong. Actually, might have been the Babler 15. One of your 15-year-olds
was it? Because Winston 18 won, didn't it?
That was last year.
That was last year because I was incredibly bitter, but it's such a
good, but the first year we ran it, you had two 15s that scored incredibly well, and one of them I think won, but I can't remember. Was it Old Pulteney won and Babler came second?
One or either way,
else.
Great to see. Great to see. So the first time, you know what I mean, from a color perspective, it's the first time that we're seeing. Well, it's the first time we're seeing sherry in any impactful way, I would argue, from a color perspective. So this is 12 years refill bourbon. So all majority second fill, some first, some third in here. So there is some first, but I always say kind of all refill because we don't get to that point. But when we come to whiskey clubs, I think it's important to talk about. Then we're 3 years minimum in second fill Oloroso sherry casks from Jerez. This is 46% non-chill filtered and natural color. Out of the two, and Malcolm and I disagree on this, and everyone's entitled to their wrong opinion. Out of the two, the 15 is probably my favorite. And the reason being is that it's the spicier, nuttier side to sherry. It's not that the 18 is objectively better or worse. It's just different from the 18. And I think it's that nuttier, spicier side to Oloroso that I really, really love. And then when we get into the 18, that's that salted chocolate that we began at the beginning. Yeah. So that's that creamy chocolate and that reaching deeper into that Oloroso cask and pulling out that heavier side, that sweeter side, arguably. So this is nuttier, spicier, 12 years in bourbon, 3 years in sherry, Oloroso specifically. And all the casks are earmarked to be split, in fact. So the way the guys like to age them at the distillery, we have 5 warehouses that we fill just now. 2 to 3, depending on how you look at it from how they section it up, racked warehousing. And for that one, we keep the majority of our young spirit, or things that are earmarked for the 12-year-old. In our dunnage, that's where we keep the majority of our old. So anything in the 18, all of that came from our dunnage warehousing. 15 is split. So it's split between our rack and our dunnage. And Malcolm swears by it, that there's a spot in the dunnage warehouse that gives an extra level of chocolate.
Interesting. That's very bourbon. You hear that a lot about bourbon brands and finding the sweet spot in the warehouse.
But he's obsessed with it, and he's like, I've been here 38 years. I swear by it. When we pull sherry casks from here versus when we pull them from the back, completely different flavor. There's more chocolate here,
and it makes sense, because it's atmospheric pressure as much as temperature or anything else. And surely that's going to vary.
Who the hell am I to disagree with the master distiller who's been there for
if you can't taste over 3 decades? Caramel coloring. How can you taste any changes?
Exactly. My credibility's gone down the toilet here.
I don't think. Oh no, single malt, 12 years, over 12 years, gold medal, W Club Members' Choice Awards, 2023.
There you go.
And it won. Yeah. So it was the runner-up. So maybe it was the Balblair was the winner of that category. But I could be wrong because it is 3 years ago, but I'm pretty sure that this outscored the 25. Now we don't share our results with the public, but only with the privately. But I think it was one of those things where it was like, it maybe didn't outscore, but it scored, like the difference was maybe like minimal. When obviously it's 10 years aging in the difference and a chunk of the price. So it's interesting to see customers, it was blind taste tested. So
I think blind tasting is such a powerful thing to do. And it's something I do as much as I can. I remember my dad and I, my sister and my wife, my sister, my mum, for Christmas did these coat hanger calendars for my dad and I. And each of us had, I think it was 20 different miniatures on each of the coat hangers. And come Boxing Day, we did a blind tasting of all of them. And the girls set up this really cool blind tasting for us, and we didn't know when they poured them, brought them out. And it was amazing to see drams that we thought we loved, and we were like, yo, no, it's one of my favorite whiskies, way down the pecking order, and ones that we had never even considered way up.
Yeah.
Blind tasting is so important because it
No,
removes
it's brilliant,
all preconceptions of what you're tasting.
That's why I keep finding little driver's drams. We cleaned the house recently, it's been family staying, and you're sorting through, and I keep finding little kind of like minis like the ones on this, except you know, maybe a faded marker where it said like OP12, and I'm like, that could be Old Pulteney,
Must be Old Pulteney.
but it could be anything. But one is that you then crack them open, and now you could be trying like some 40-year-old rare whiskey that someone's gifted me out of their bottle, and
you don't know,
I've left in my jacket pocket and got drunk and forgot about, or it could be, you know,
those things happen to you. Isn't that great? Just some random 40-year-old whiskey that I put in my pocket drunk.
And then, or it could be visit a distillery, and I was driving because my partner loves whiskey as well. So we take turns who's designated driver. So you take home a driver's pack and then forget about it. And then, but you're drinking these things, and it may as well be a blind tasting because, you know, these could be 2 or 3 years old. I have no idea what it is. Yeah. You never know. You're like, that was incredible. But Melvin says 100% blind tastings. 100% blind tastings are hard because then it's even hard to pick up the glass. But I do agree that blind tastings are the way to go. Certainly,
love that joke.
Certainly, feeling the 15 is a step up from the entry bottles. Very fruity, chocolate, more spice.
Yeah, there's a level of complexity here that comes with it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I like the 15, but still preferring the 12. Interesting. And that's from Scott. The 15 smoothens off the edges of the 12. Smooths the edges of the 12 out, but I like the edges. That's good. I mean, that's why we love these. People have an affinity for brand, or why these blind tastings, because the edges are, it's like the imperfections, you know, 100%. Like you know, like some beautiful actress's mole or something, like, you know.
It's just cool to see. It just creates that point of differentiation, you know.
Yeah. Old Pulteney tight when it comes to the Angel share?
It's a good question. No, we sit roughly about average, and obviously being in the north coast of Scotland is let's say freezing. But ultimately, because of the warehousing setup, that fluctuation is not massive. And ultimately, what you're looking at is not necessarily just temperature, because temperature is obviously important, but fluctuation in temperature is the big one, because it's that casks breathe, right? So in the heat, they expand, and in the cold, they contract. So almost regardless, that's not really a true statement, but almost regardless of your temperature in the warehouse, it's that fluctuation to hot to cold, and then expanding and contracting. And in the warehouses in Pulteney, we don't see that massively. So you're sitting maybe a bit colder than a Speyside distillery or warehouse, sorry, but not a negligible amount. You're even over 20, 30 years, we're not seeing anything out with the average that SW would report, which is roughly 2% starting point, and then
because you find that they say that with, like, you know, Scapa or Highland Park, you know, when you go that far north, that you are seeing a considerable drop off. Maybe not. I actually don't know about the percent of Angel share, but at least in terms of the influence of the wood over shorter periods of time, you know, it takes a lot longer to sort of round off the flavors of the whiskey.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience and having conversations with, you know, Stuart Harvey before and Sarah, etc., and the inevitability of me asking nerdy questions like this because I'm a whiskey nerd. No one has said anything out of the norm who have been working with the casks for decades in the times. So no, we're not seeing anything, even from an ABV loss at 0.5% roughly per year. We're not seeing anything out of the norm with bourbons to sherries to anything experimental.
Yeah.
But it's a good question, because you would assume so.
Yeah, well, also then the other side of it is you would assume maybe with being coastal areas, at least in this Atlantic archipelago, tend to...
Making it sound so romantic in the north of Scotland.
I just don't want to say Great Britain, you know, but because I'm including Irish whiskey in this, when you're coastal, you don't get massive temperature fluctuations, you know, because the North Sea or the Atlantic, they have an impact on the climate. That means that it never gets super hot during the summer, and it never gets super cold during the winter. And I wonder if your proximity to the coast would impact that. Whereas if you're same latitude north, maybe further inland.
I'm sure it does. I just don't have the answer for that. But ultimately, the conversations I've had, we just don't see it.
No, I mean, I was also, you know, could be talking out my arse as well. So the Bob has said 15 and 18-year-old side by side, 15 spicier and more challenging. 18 is a super smooth after dinner dram, both great BFM, value for money. But as I get older, I tend to favor older sherried whiskies. Great lineup tonight. Well, Bob, you've this perfectly good nudge. We'll move on to the 18 to finish off our night. As we do, the 15-year-old is £79, so you'll be getting 15% off that after this 18-year-old is sampled. So enjoy that. I'll bring up the price of the 18 as well. We're pouring that, but I'll just read some comments first.
Yeah.
Robin says, liking the 15 the most, wish I had some haggis to match with it.
Oh, great.
Definitely. Bob says, got to do a 15/18 blend now. The 50-year-old seems to have lost the briny, salty, not as evident, however, mellow. 12 on the top still for us. So a lot of people liking the 12 over the 15. Rabs, the 15 is lovely, very inviting on the nose with chocolate and fruitcake on the palate. Great body with a freshly baked fruitcake and cream. Finish touch of cream, spice, and a hint of sea salt. 15 has the richest mouthfeel so far. Could be the non-chill filtering.
Hey, it could be. It could be.
It's also, so it's a higher ABV than the Harbour.
It's higher than the Harbour and the 12, but 2% less than the 10. Yeah. And I think was it Dave Broom talking about this years ago, saying that 48% because alcohol carries flavor through, right? It's a really good carrier flavor. And I remember him saying years ago, I'm not sure if it was one of his books or was listening to him in a seminar. He talked about 48% being around optimum, give or take a couple of percentage points, probably to the higher, around optimum for carrying flavor without being too domineering. But I think when he said that, he very much made the statement of like, that is a sweeping statement across whiskey, because we have the outliers of, a fifth fill hogshead. In fact, you probably want that maybe less of an ABV, right? Or, first fill PX exclusively assured, you probably want to see a higher ABV so it pushes through it. But 46-48 feels optimum, and I don't disagree with him as somebody who buys whiskey regularly. Is that cask strength, I inevitably dilute them, and then with those rough fag packet calculations of that, I'd probably reduce that to about 50% or something. It feels that you catch it in that space.
No, definitely. I mean, I totally agree. I was actually having this conversation with a colleague of mine recently, and I think that 46-48% is the sweet spot. I think if you are a brand, going back to our conversation from earlier about 40% is a lot of people, to most average person, 40% is too high for a drink. But I think 46 carries a lot of that flavor that you get in from the cask strengths without having that being too punchy, and without B carrying all the extra excise duty. It's one of the reasons why cask strength whiskey is more expensive.
100%.
So you're saving that money as well, which you can pass on to the consumer. Casking strength. What do you cask at? Because that's going to have a big impact as well, which I think we underspoke about in the industry.
Yeah, so we're sort of 64% of casking strength. I'm trying to remember. So Knock still will fill at 69 in some cases. However, I speak a lot of people that kind of have heard about this, and then they get kind of fixated on it, that we should bottle it higher or cask at higher ABV. And in fact, 64 is arguably better.
Sweet spot.
It's arguably better because it becomes the volatility in the cask, and therefore your final product in the hands of a blender, right? Because to ruin Christmas early for everyone, single malt is blended, right? All single malts are blended until we get to single cask single malt.
They're married.
Married, of course. We need to, the airy fairies, the tooth fairy is real, right? It's married. So they're married inevitably. So, but ultimately it becomes an easier job for your blender to do that. It's if you're filling at 64 from you make into cask, and significantly so. 69, the volatility increases, and that's not to say that you can't create incredible whiskies from it. It's just the volatility is there. So Pulteney, we're casking, and this is not 100% true. There will be examples that we filled into at 69, basis Sarah's decisions and Malcolm's decisions. But generally 64, 63.5, 64.
Yeah, that's it. No, because I mean, I think it was. Yeah, I mean, I've always found the idea of what you cask out fascinating, but to be honest, I've never had. If I don't have enough controlled samples to know the difference and how much of an impact. No, it's more of an abstract thing for me. Caithness used to cask independently, obviously, because that's what they do. Caithness. I don't know if they still do it, but they used to cask stuff or cask stuff at still strength, and then age it, and then
just straight off at 68.5.
Yeah, or sometimes higher. I found this out because I had this bottle for this company I worked for. It wasn't my bottle. I wish it was. A Caithness Jameson bottled from the old Jameson distillery in Dublin, which closed in 66 or 64 or something. Cool. So it had been bottled been cast in the 60s, and Caithness had released it in the 80s sometimes. So maybe a 30-year-old whiskey. and it was incredible. And it was like the color was like, well, which one's blue? I'm trying to find. Is it black as the taste? Yeah, your phone or the tasting boxes that everyone's drams. It almost looked like that. It was nuts. But it was 70 something, 77% ABV or something like that. It was like, and this was at 30 years old. And we speculated. I asked people in the industry, loads of people. I was like, how could it have gotten to this? Like, what's going on?
Even
here?
triple distilling, you can't rectify.
Yeah. And I'm like, is it a proofing thing? Is it like, has it been mislabeled or whatever? And one speculation was that maybe it was stored, like, these companies in the 80s especially used to store things in funky places. So maybe it was stuck in like a too humid a room, and it had like the bourbon effect, which you do get in some
I was just about to
where...
say, I had a conversation about this, and I saw As We Get It dram from Ian McLeod, and it was like a 72% Tamdhu, and it was the same thing. It was super dark, and and the speculation was that it was an arid section of the warehouse that the ABV went up rather than went down.
But so then I found another whiskey from them, which was also an old Irish bottling in the 80s that was high, which also was high ABV. And someone's told me, now it could be apocryphal. This is from people who have massive knowledge in the industry, but I've not spoken to anyone at Caithness about this. But that it was actually, they were casking at still strength. So they would order a bit like G&M do now. Maybe they still do now. I genuinely don't know much about Caithness. So anyone from Caithness watching, I'm sorry. But there's
a CEO.
Yeah. But they were casking at the time anyway at still strength, new make spirit, and then aging it themselves, or aging it, they own the cask as it aged, whether they were storing it, I'm not sure. And that's what they were bottling. So again, I've not had that officially confirmed, but the person who told me, I can't remember who it was now, but would have known their stuff, knew more about whiskey than I could ever know.
I was going to say Balbelair, our sister distillery, vast majority is at 68.5, 69 still strength. Everything else is vast majority 64. There you go. I know it is, and we don't know why it's interesting, but it's interesting to see, because out of the norm is always interesting. Like, why are you doing that? What are you doing different? That's good. The 18 for me is, I don't know if anyone saw my involuntary reaction as Luke was talking when I tasted it. It's just like luscious. It's like textural. It's not dark chocolate in any way, but it's like heavier than milk. It's got this real depth to it. There's complexity, there's spices. That I think the black pepper for me comes into it, but it's not dominating in any way. And for me, I think someone had mentioned 15, the salinity disappears, and there's an interesting scientific piece behind that. The 18, it comes back, but in no way is it overtly coastal at all, I don't think. But there's salinity, and that's where I talk about at the very beginning, salted chocolate. It's like just a sprinkle of sea salt to elevate the flavor of the chocolate that you're having. It's Malcolm might see this. He's right. 18 is pound for pound, and I think for most people is that all-round deep, rich, lovely dram that we all know and love, and we want in a whiskey, especially a re-racked whiskey.
No, it's incredible. It reminds me of like a kind of a dark chocolate. I know you said it's not dark chocolate, but... for me. No, but it's like a dark chocolate mousse, as opposed to like what we would think of, which you can kind of get salted. I'm trying to think. There's like there was a salted chocolatey mousse dessert I had in some lovely restaurant recently, and it's really taken me back to that. Just incredible. Really, really nice. I can see, did you mention earlier on like a creme brulee-ness to it? I can get a touch of that as well.
It's the charred sugar, that kind of burnt sugar on top. And I don't know if anyone's got Harbour left. I've just got a little bit, and I keep going back to it, and it's just seeing how different it is compared to what we initially had.
I do, thanks to you.
I think it's such an interesting thing, because when we do tastings, everyone's so obsessed with getting to the last whiskey. And in fact, the reason that we set them up, at least when I set them up, it's always in flavour profile. It's never about expense or age. Coincidentally, when we set this up, it did work out that way. No, because the 10-year-old is more expensive than the 15, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see, and I always encourage people to go back to the first one, because a lot of people think it's the least, the worst of the lot, and in fact, no, it's just the least intense of the lot. You go back and give it a little taste.
So this is the same price as the 10-year-old, actually.
Oh yeah,
yeah, £99.
Well, there you go. I mean, a sub £100 18-year-old
in this market is very impressive,
and because you get 15% off,
and you get 50% off. Exactly, yeah. Which I will give the code out for now, and then I will read some of your comments. I can't do the maths on that. It's going to be like £84 or something, is it? 15% off. What would that do?
Be a good price.
I'm I'm not signed in, so it's not going to work. So the discount code is WS 26OP. And it's not going to let me test it here because I'm not logged into my W Club Premium account. But that is for W Club Premium members only. So the, oh, maybe it will.
There we go. We're getting there.
Yeah, I didn't know the password off the top of my head.
You've done remarkably well putting all this together in such a short space of time.
Oh, well, thank you. I've got two of them in my basket for some reason, so it's telling me. So, yeah, you're saving 14.85, so 84.15, which is about what I said.
It wasn't.
For that after the discount, which is incredible value for an 18-year-old at this price point. So that code again is WS for Whisky Shop 26OP for Old Pulteney. So don't forget, Frank has beaten me to it. So please do get into the chat what your favorites of the night is and any kind of final thoughts. I was going to read some of the comments which I've been neglecting on this 18-year-old because I've been waffling too much on about a brand that is actually a direct competitor to the company I work for. So
killing it.
Doing a great job here tonight. So yeah, Steve says Harbour is much better than Huddart and better value. Interesting. So Huddart was actually on our last, I did look this up a couple of months ago. This went on sale or we were putting this together. That was actually on our last Digital Drams.
Yes.
That one. But remind me, what was the finish in that?
All refill bourbon casks sitting at 46%, but it was finished in peated casks. So it wasn't a peated whiskey itself, but it was finished in ex-bourbon peated casks. So it was that in no way domineering in smoke, but just had that kind of wisp of it. It was like that whisper surrounding that typical, what we probably maybe closer or in between Harbour and 12 that you would expect from a foundation flavor profile, and just that whisper smoke around it.
Yeah, no, I remember it being gorgeous. It's interesting that the Harbour's preferred here by Steve. I've been banned from cooking haggis in the microwave. The smell is overwhelming for a Southerner. Brilliant. 43% seems to be a great sweet spot. That goes back to our previous conversation. As I said, I've been neglecting these comments here, folks. Apologies. So Alan's got raisins and sauternes on the palate, on the nose, and the palate of the 18. Really impressed. 18 is gorgeous. I'm a bit biased as I do like Old Pulteney. One of the whiskies I got serious about. So freshly baked ginger biscuits on the nose is Frank D.
Nice.
Taste note. 18 is a beautiful jam, really enjoyable. What's the price point for that one? So as I say, £99, maybe £84 with your 15% discount, WS 26OP. That will only work if you're logged in as a premium member. So yeah, if it's not working for you, just do what I did and clumsily log in. It's smooth, rich, mince pie, Christmassy with whiskey, butter, Black Forest Gateau. Awesome stuff. Black Forest Gateau. I can see that.
And I prefer, you know, this the fundamental, like we go to Christmas cake for sherry cask. Mince pies, that's much better tasting.
Yeah.
We're just gonna start using that a bit more.
I know, definitely. I feel like, yeah.
We overuse Christmas cake.
We do. Yeah, there's maybe more of a sweetness off Christmas cake. There is something to do. I don't know. It's the kind of assuming the Christmas cake isn't too dry, there's something on the finish that you do find in whiskey that is maybe less than a mince pie. But I get what you're saying. I eat a lot more mince pies at Christmas than I do Christmas cake. I'm not a big fan.
You can give them in one bite.
Maybe it's the marzipan or whatever. But the brown sugar with sea salt, very nice. The 18 is beautiful. I have a bottle and need to crack it open. So now we're into the kind of whose is the favorite. 15, 10, 18, 12 says Frank D. 18, 15, 12 Harbour. So we've got some more tasty notes there, some fantastic tasty notes. The 18, the 18, the salt is back, feels luxury. 15, amazing too. So it was 99 for Steve has said, which is the price point for the dram. So 99 for the 18, 79 for the 15. I think it was 47 for the 12, I want to say, something around
in and around that number, wasn't it?
And then it was 30 something for the Harbour. And the other one was 99, but not available via us, only available through the distillery. It looks to me here, I'm not going to bore everyone by reading out every single answer, but I'm going to roughly say it's the 18's edging it, closely followed by the 15. So Melvin's also the 18-year-old cinnamon, green apples, skins, honey, but I'm still having the 10-year-old, which has me flummoxed. and want more. Can't think of a better 10-year-old from the top of my head. That's high praise.
That's very high praise. Thank you very much.
Only got the discount 17-year-old, discontinued, sorry, 17-year-old at home. So the 18 is on my radar to buy now.
Yeah, I got a good story of the 17-year-old that would have people kicking me.
A couple of people, including Scott, have got the 10-year-old as their favorite.
It's good to see a good mix, actually. And obviously, thank you so much. It's really lovely to be able to relay that back to Sarah and the team around the 10-year-old. It's because that's kind of their first furrow, or Sarah's first furrow into Old Pulteney and doing it. So we were really happy with it when produced, but she's just such a talented blender. She just has this very instinctual attitude towards it. So it's really good feedback. Thank you.
Fantastic. So Rabbit said, how long's the discount code? Or no, sorry, someone else said that. Chris and Kat said, how long is this move? Well, valid for 2 weeks. So we send the recording out tomorrow, all going to plan of this session for anyone who's not joined us live. And then everyone's got a collective 2 weeks until that expires. So Thursday, 2 weeks, whatever day that is, the 16th or something, will expire. So do get on it. I always think, you're better off to do it. Just do it now while you've had a few whiskeys. That's how I do all my shopping.
Make bad decisions.
Are you suggesting buying one of your whiskies would be a bad decision?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm saying I'm going to go and buy one of my own whiskies, which is a bad decision, considering I have them all at home.
There you go. No, well, thank you for joining us, folks. All going to plan. The next one is actually going to be a bit of a different tasting. We're going to be doing it. I hate saying, because something always goes wrong and then it gets delayed and there's an issue. But it's a rum. It's all going to plan. It'll be a rum. So I'm not going to say the brand. I know this isn't a podcast, but I feel like there's that podcaster curse where they, if your favorite podcast ever teases their next guest and it's not like already been recorded,
exactly,
then something always happens. But yeah, a rum from the Caribbean, or if any Americans are watching, the Caribbean. Yeah, so keep an eye out for that one. Steve says enjoys the bromance. Well, it's been great to do it in person. Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining, and we'll catch you on the next one. We'll have loads more of these from September to Christmas. I know we've been kind of sparsing them this year so far, so apologies for that. But yeah, hope you keep an eye on your emails, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks,
Cheers,
guys.
folks.
Bye.